So despite the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 came out just over 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording, and the fact that I bought it late, I've still sunk an immense amount of hours into the game as I've been hopelessly falling in love with it. Now, I actually am a dungeon master for a D&D group, and I've been a dungeon master for the better part of a year at this point, and so it gives me a sort of unique perspective on the game, and I thought I'd share that with you about my sort of mini review of Baldur's Gate 3. Let's jump right in. I did want to let you know beforehand, there are no spoilers in this review beyond basic early game gameplay where I try not to show off too much. Touching on the story first, the story itself is very well crafted, it's excellently put together, it's got multiple different plot lines going at once, and the decisions you make in the game will drastically affect the experience that you have, whether you're playing a good character and you're trying to save everybody, or you're a murderous psychopath who's going around killing everyone around you. It will very strongly reflect the choices you make in a way that's satisfying. Even if you are some sort of murder hobo, my second character of 3 is a murder hobo, and I'm actually having a blast because the story is still a story. I don't feel like I'm breaking the story by doing this. I think the best way I can very quickly sum up the story without getting too into the details is it feels like the game is your story as opposed to you playing the game's story, if that makes sense. The next area to talk through is combat. Combat is strongly based around Dungeons & Dragons, the board game, where it's a turn-based, role-play style fantasy game. And this game sticks to that fairly truly. It is a role-playing game where you can get very into your character, where you've got races, classes, subclasses, a background that affects your abilities, and then being able to sort of choose your strengths and weaknesses. We'll discuss that a bit more in the character creation portion because it's more relevant to that. However, Baldur's Gate 3 does use the different action economies that you would see in Dungeons & Dragons. So it's got actions, bonus actions, and movement, and it's very well explained so that way you can understand it even if you're new to the franchise. The game is also very player-focused, so you can use a large number of different strategies to overcome obstacles. One example is you can hide a bunch of bombs, leading your enemy to it, and then blowing up the bombs just as you're out of reach to win over the encounter. Or you can stack multiple movement and visual enhancing spells on a large group of enemies to dwindle down their health and kill them slowly but surely before they can even make it over to you. There's also a varied number of combat styles, whether you want to be hand-to-hand combat, sort of like a monk, or you're stealth-focused, hiding in the shadows, or you're a very magic-based player who actually is a healer mage as opposed to a damaging mage. It gives you a lot of room to play the way you want. Adding on to this, there's multiple ways to approach any given encounter, from going at it invisible, whether you cast a spell or drink an invisibility potion, or you fight them head on, guns blazing, barbarian rage mode, or you actually flank them from behind with half your party and approach from the front with the rest, sort of enclosing on them before they know what hit them. Shifting focus to the visuals of the game, it's absolutely beautiful. I love the way that this game is built. The graphical fidelity is very much there. It's got a very consistent art style that fits the theme that they were going in and very much so sells you on this fantasy experience. It's also got gore and blood when it's appropriate, so it's super satisfying to run up and just stab somebody with your dagger. Or especially if you're someone like me who loves to play magic characters, it's got beautiful animations for spell casting, as well as if you're playing a hand-to-hand combat sort of enemy. It's got wonderful special martial abilities, and it's very satisfying, especially as you level up and you unlock new abilities. The strength and usage of these abilities is reflected by what you're going to be seeing on screen. Also, if you're someone like me who, when you play Dark Souls, you play Fashion Souls, essentially where you just want to have the most aesthetically pleasing gear possible, there's a myriad of different armor sets with unique, well-crafted designs, as well as a system for changing the colors of your armor to suit whatever your preference is. Something I really love about this game that I do hope other games are able to get right going forward is the companions. So I found interest in almost all of my companions, whether they were more reserved individual that somehow just kept pulling me into their story, making me want to know more, while they're very slowly drip feeding me information about their backstory. Or they presented as this powerful demon slayer with a tragic life, and I'm just totally ingrained in their uniqueness and how it's sold to me, as well as the voice acting being just phenomenal. I also really like how you can very easily switch companions in and out, and I don't really feel punished for it beyond maybe not having the gear for a new companion because I didn't plan properly. But all in all, it's super satisfying to go, oh, I no longer really need a mage. I would rather have some sort of stealth-focused character because that's the kind of missions I'm going on. Or maybe I just don't like a companion at all. They're just not for me, and I tell them to get lost, and I don't have them part of my party at all anymore. Now, touching on the character creation, you can easily spend an hour in this menu. A number of people have. I had so much fun crafting my character. For my first character, I recreated my very first Dungeons & Dragons character, which was this dragonborn druid character, and I loved crafting it. It was so satisfying. Also, because it's based around the Dungeons & Dragons game, they have well-crafted races, classes, and subclasses built off of the D&D system, and it's super satisfying to see the different advantages, the different story and role-playing elements that this has set up for you. Also, and this was something I really didn't expect, your choices at the character creation matter because they will give you different ways to handle in-game situations or obstacles you run into, whether it gives you advantage or a hidden dialogue option as you approach these things. This system also allows you to give your character the sense of background and heritage depending on the race you chose that sort of lives outside of the game situation that you're currently playing through. Now, this also allows you to choose your character's initial strengths at the beginning of the game from your proficiency options. So for instance, you could be more adept at religion-based pieces of information because your background is you were a cleric and you lived in a church for a good chunk of your life. Or you focus on your acrobatics due to your dexterous nature and you've been kind of stealthy all your life. Additionally, you can actually balance out your skills, so you get to choose how you want to delegate some points, so you can put points into your strength, or your dexterity, or your constitution, etc., to sort of get your build going for the future of your playthrough. The system's also fairly user-friendly, and it explains itself well, which is helpful for players that are not super familiar with this Dungeons & Dragons system. Now, I think it's only fair to go through and kind of discuss some of the cons that I experienced. While they're not that many, I still think it's a fair thing to discuss. So the first thing is, the UI can be a bit overwhelming, and I had to sort of read and reread the controls before it started to sink in. I think they could have done better here to make it more user-friendly for people, myself included, who I actually know D&D very well, and still sort of doing this on a keyboard was kind of confusing for me at times. While most of the movement and the combat felt fairly fluid, especially for a turn-based game, I noticed there were a lot of times where the choices that my character would make made very little sense. So for instance, I tried to jump over something at one point, and it instead understood it as it was going to climb up a ladder and then jump off of the thing that it climbed on, and it actually caused my character to lose like 30 health right away, instead of just simply jumping across the obstacle I was trying to get around. The last area of issue I wanted to discuss is near the end of the game, I did notice that there were a little bit more visual errors. It didn't have as high a fidelity, as well as I did notice a higher stream of bugs. It does seem that Larian, the company that made this game, is sending out hotfixes pretty consistently. So at the time that you buy the game, it may not have this sort of issue in it, but for me in my playthrough, I certainly did experience it, and I experienced it on multiple playthroughs because I have 3 different characters. So I did want to sort of throw that out there. Now, with all of that said, I did want to sort of sum it up. I am in love with this game. I have had so much fun. It's so well done. You can see the sheer quality that was put into this. And similarly to Elden Ring, while it also has quality, on top of that, it's just this thick layer of quantity. There's just so much to do, so many ways to handle things, so many role play mechanisms that you can use. And I have not seen this level of detail put into a game in a very long time. I cannot recommend it enough. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it about a 9.5. I would love to give it a 10 out of 10 and say it's a perfect game, but especially with the UI, I had a very hard time for the first 4 to 5 hours before it started to sink in. And I don't think that's just from my lack of experience. I do think that that could have been set up better. But I'm a very picky person. When it comes to settling down and playing a game, I'm very quick to nitpick it or get bored and move on, and I've not had that experience with this game. I cannot recommend it enough. This is my review of the game. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, consider subscribing, stay safe.